Well, hello, everyone. It is Thursday, October the 31st. I guess that makes it Halloween. And this is Paul English Live. Or is it? I'm not just being cryptic at the beginning. This is a slightly different show this week, and if you've seen the adverts for it, you'll know why. Joined by an old mucker, an old friend, a grand colleague. We'll be together for the next couple of hours, catching up, doing things, talking about this, that, and the other. Andrew Carrington Hitchcock is my guest for today's show. Yeah, hi everyone, and welcome back. This is Paul English Not So Live. How about that? A few explanations coming up in a moment or two. And as I said, my guest for today's show, Andrew Carrington Hitchcock. So this is slightly different all round really this week. But before we get into all of that, I have to play you this. I think I have to play you this. Yeah, I do.
All shows that air on our network are strictly over 18 years old. Thank you for listening to WBN 324 Talk Radio.
Yeah, thank you for listening for WBN 324 Talk Radio. All shows here on WBN are for people aged 18 years and above. And my guest is older than 18 years. Andy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Paul. Great to be back with you. I'm good, and it's great to be recording this show with you today.
It is. I'm fine, although, of course, not quite used to recording. So this is the first show that I've done where we've done a pre-record. There's all sorts of logistical reasons why I had to do one today. Not least of which being that Andy's never available when we're doing the show live because he's somewhere else doing certain things at 8 o'clock. So I've never been able to get him on the show doing it live. But also I've had other logistical commitments today, which have kind of excluded me doing a live show. So we will return back to live shows next week. That's the plan. Anyway, there's no reason as far as I'm aware why we shouldn't be live next week. But the timing, Andy's also been pretty good because amongst the cohorts that arrive on the show, Paul Beener, who's a regular, many people will know him, he's doing something really, really silly today, which is that he's moving house. I don't quite know where, but I know that he had to be out of wherever he was by October the 31st, which of course is today. So it actually falls really well. So the rest of the gang, Patrick, Paul and Eric, they've all got the night off. We'll be running for 2 hours and 2 hours only this week. There won't be a post show. And of course, there probably won't be any real live chat in Rumble tonight because we're not live on Rumble. Although this video because I'm just shooting it as a video as well, or recording it as a video. That should have been or will be uploaded to Rumble. In fact, if you're listening to this, that's exactly what's happened. So fingers crossed, technically, I've got all my ducks in a row and that's what's going to occur. Anyway, Andy, we did something a few weeks ago, but overall, our paths have not crossed that often over the past couple of years because we've been going down different little paths, albeit we've been in touch, haven't we? And we've been having lots of fun here in England. What have you been up to recently? What's going on in the world of Andrew Carrington Hitchcock?
Well, it's interesting because I still, firstly with your shows, I've been listening to them since the start and really enjoying them. They're one of the shows that I always download every week. I am not generally around at, well, I tend to go to bed around about 8:30. It's because I get up at a ridiculously early time in the morning. I think I heard you on a recent show saying that you sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and you play Sudoku for about an hour and then you can get back to sleep, sort of 4 to 5 o'clock, and then you get back to sleep. With
Yes.
me, I wake up and I'll like this morning, for example. I woke up at 5 o'clock and I'd woken up a couple more times during the night, managed to get back to sleep, no problem. By 5:30, I just gave up trying to get back to sleep. And so it was one of those things. And that's why it's always difficult for me to commit for a 8 o'clock show. I did Mark Collett, rather. I think David Duke calls him Mark Collett, but I'm sure it's Collett.
Yeah.
He kindly invited me to do 8 till 10 with him, but he goes on a Wednesday on Patriotic Weekly Review, which is a show that I believe you did with him some time ago. But
Yeah, a few
because
years
of my
back now.
strange, yeah, it was a good show, but my strange sort of sleep pattern kind of prevents me from committing to that. And so
I like
this is
that.
where we are now.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's not always like that. There was a few days ago, I got up at something like 10 past 8, and I hadn't really been doing much the day before. I don't know why, and I still went to bed relatively early. So I just can't predict it. So it's difficult to commit. But we are actually recording on the day that we're broadcasting. We're recording only about 5 hours before you generally go out live anyway.
That's
So
right.
it is pretty current. And what I've been up to recently is I do 4 shows a week. 3 of them are just myself now. I'll just run through those quickly for
Yeah,
the
please do.
audience. Yeah, I pretty much operate off my website, achshow.com. On my Saturday show, which is called I'm Talking to You. What I do is I do a little format where I go through all the shows that I've listened to in the last week that I've enjoyed and, let the audience know where they can find them. And then I do a roundup of the independent news of the week that I can find on the websites. It's all sort of, put together live. I don't prepare any of that sort of stuff. I prepare obviously all the shows, the notes of shows that I've listened to, because I won't remember all of that. And then I finish off with there's a website called beforeitsnews.com, which has some pretty fanciful stories on it. But they do have what is interesting about the site is the stories are ranked in accordance with the amount of hits that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I conclude each I'm Talking to You Saturday show with a top 10 rundown, 10 till 1, the amount of people looking at it, and the length of time it's been up, and obviously the title of the post that people are looking at. And that's the Saturday show for me, which is generally anywhere from 20 minutes to half an hour. The Sunday show is the traditional Christian message, and that is something that I've just started a new series on the parables. So there are 41 of them, and I just put the first one out last week. So essentially, I start off with the Lord's Prayer so that anyone who wants to pray with somebody can do, because that person is, of course, me. And it says in the Bible, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I am there with you. So it's for the benefit of people like myself who don't have a local church that they can really
Yeah.
what would be the right word, get along with,
Mm-hmm.
have the same understanding of the Bible as, and so they look for their material, if you like, online. Their fellow fellow believers or understanders of the scripture online, and then I do a parable, and it's up to the audience to decide if they will ever think about that, give them something, food for thought on a Sunday. So that goes out early morning, and then I do the Limish show, which is the show that you and I started off. That goes out at 10 o'clock live on radiosoapbox.com on a Sunday, and up until a few weeks ago, after you left to pursue your own projects a few years ago, Malifka Scott came in and did a great job, and the show kind of changed with the way that you and I would do it, and it became more structured. He'd have a certain structure he would use, and I'd have a structure I would use. So
Yeah.
when he has taken a step back from live radio for a period of time, so I decided to go it alone, and I had a couple of hiccups. A couple of weeks ago, I did a show I really wasn't happy with. But aside from that, it's been quite fun because it's been a new challenge doing all that stuff myself. And essentially every day I'm gathering material for the Saturday I'm Talking to You show and the Limish show, and then going through it obviously on those respective shows. And then the other show I do each week is again on radiosoapbox.com, 10 a.m. UK time live again, and that's with Dr. Peter Hammond, who of course has been with me for many, many years now and is quite well appreciated. And today he's actually doing, as he does every Halloween, he prefers to call it Reformation Day, because that is the day, 31st of October, when Martin Luther nailed the 35 Theses on the church.
Is it really? I heard,
Yeah.
Actually, I think I heard him talking about that on your show on Tuesday. He did mention it. I didn't catch what the reference was for. Well, blimey. I mean, I'm we spoke, didn't we, pre-show about this wonderful day. But before we even do that, Andy, you and I obviously take a lot for granted in our conversation because we've known each other for too long. Not long enough. I don't know what you want to say. But for listeners out there on WBN 324 who are not familiar with you, and I know you've probably done this 1,000 times before, and of course I know roughly kind of sort of what you're going to say, but even so, I think we need to cover this because it's important. It would be really useful for listeners to know a little bit about your pre-story. You know, here you are at the mic with me today, but there's quite a bit more to you than that, isn't there? And there's quite a bit of a track record with your involvement in the circles of inquiring about politically incorrect truths, or whatever we want to call it. You're a man long in the tooth with this, and I think it would be great for people to just hear. However, you can take as long or as short as you like, to just cover the key salient points. Why is Andrew Carrington Hitchcock here today talking about these things? How did that come about? And what's your sort of prehistory prior to being on the radio with regards to your role as an author? It would be good to hear that.
Yeah, it's I had this memory of when it wasn't the first time we met, although it was from the first place we met. The restaurant in St. Martin's in the Fields in the basement. You remember that?
I do.
And I remember I was sort of looking up because I was already there, and I knew that we'd spoken many times, and this was the first time we were going to meet. And when you walked in, and then I saw our eyes locked, and I kind of knew it was you, even though I'd never seen you before. But it was another time that we went there when Pastor Eli came to England, and him and our other friends, they took a bus across to the city area of London, which is where the Bank of England is and things like that. And
yippee!
We walked. Do you remember we walked?
I do.
All the way there.
I like to walk even to this day, Andy. I'm always walking whenever I can. I think we've got to keep doing that. It's very important. But yeah, we did. It was a great walk.
Yeah,
actually,
it
really
was
good.
fun, wasn't it? And it was that was great. That would have been over 10 years ago now, I think.
Blimey,
it
bloody well will be as well. Holy moly, it is.
That was fun, and that was when we all we had pictures on the. You've got like steps going up to the Rothschild Bank building, and this was a Sunday
again. And, yes, you do. Yeah, the Seven Arrows. Those guys. Yeah, we did. That was on the Sunday. Yes.
Yeah, and someone actually came out, a security guard, and got us to walk away. It was really weird because it was almost as if they knew who we were, but
They
or
got
who
Matthew to walk away. Matthew was being all Austrian, wasn't he, or Swiss or German, and he had a camera, and I think they took umbrage to that, big time styly, as it were. They weren't too happy about that, were they? No, you've got to get off the premises. You can't be anywhere near this building. Oh, all right. It was. I mean, architecturally, it was a piece of junk, wasn't it? It was just a box, but it had the 5 arrows on it. So, yes, yeah, I remember that day.
It was, Yeah, so I guess going back to, I mean, I kind of got into this because I started listening to, not so much listening to independent media because it was very difficult unless you were listening live back then. People like Alex Jones were on the air and stuff like that, but you couldn't just go online and, I'll download this MP3 and that MP3 or this video or what have you. It was a lot more difficult back in 2000, 2001. So I was reading a lot of the material. I was looking at things like rumourmillnews.com. I think they might even still be going.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
Websites
remember
like
that one. Yeah, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
good memory.
And and then I'd start finding more shows, and someone that I essentially what happened was I was hearing all this different information on lots of interesting subjects. So, for example, I think many of us, before we would be classed as, conspiracy theorists or interested in that subject, we probably heard stories of, it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald who killed Kennedy. I mean, that's the sort of thing your parents would talk about.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then, so I'd find all these different people talking about stuff like that, and then I'd really investigate it myself and look into all sorts of articles and any shows or whatever I could hear about it, books on the subject, and come to the conclusion which I thought was the most accurate. And then while I was doing that, I was hearing about all sorts of other events that I'd never even heard of before. Something like, say the USS Liberty attack. I'd never even heard of the boat, the USS Liberty, never mind the attack.
Yeah.
And so many other historical events. And so what I was trying to do was, there was so much out there that I had to look at and to listen to, that I didn't want to keep going back over the same ground. I wanted to feel that I was making some sort of progress. And in order to do that, I started making my own notes of what I thought, based upon what I had read, had actually happened on, say, for example, the Kennedy assassination. And then I would type that up. And the best way for me to keep it, so I knew where things were, was chronologically. And so I just had a Microsoft Word document. And so 1963, and then all my stuff on Kennedy. And then as I was finding out more stuff for all different years, I was just slotting them in. So to this day, I don't know what the first thing that I wrote for the book that became The Synagogue of Satan, which is probably what I'm best known for.
Yeah.
But that was how I did it. And I was just all the time listening to these different shows and looking at these different articles, as I said. And gradually it got bigger and bigger, and it just became a book. And I think my mum summed it up when she said, if you knew you were going to be writing a book, you'd have never started in the first place, because it's such a daunting thing to think about, especially when you're not a trained author. I got English language and English literature at B and C grade at GCSE, which is the exam you take at the age of 16, your first official certificate exam in the UK.
Yeah.
And I never progressed beyond that. So I was pleased with what I ended up with, and I self-published it. And then I sent some copies out to people, only 4 or 5 copies. One of them went to Tex Mars, and he wanted to order some copies and sell them over in America. And even if I gave them to him at cost price, with the shipping and everything involved, it was just
silly.
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded just doing that and not making money on them, because it's like, oh wow, Tex Mars can be sending your book. So it sounds a bit cheeky now, but I sort of got back to him. I said, look, you've got a publishing company. How about you just publish it? And of course, I sort of reflected now. I meant it in, if you want to sell it, why don't you print it, and then we save on the, on the postage and all that, which is what was holding us back. And of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But he obviously, felt good enough about the book to put the additional effort in, because it's not just a case of just printing it. It has to be proofed by them, fact checked, which is not a word that I like these days. Just like woke isn't a word that I like. But it's funny how years ago we used to say people need to wake up to what's going on, and suddenly the word woke was taken from us and reflect something completely different than what we meant it to do, which I think, we coined it earlier than other people, and that's to wake up, to what's really going on, who's really running your country, who's really running your media, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was the odd spelling mistake in my book, because I had no one to proof it or anything like that. It was just me, and he had a whole team of staff that would, go through it. I know when I was doing shows for the American Free Press and the Barnes Review a few years ago, I did the American Free Press show every 2 weeks, and the Barnes Review set of shows a few a month based upon the articles in the magazine. However many people who'd done articles wanted to speak to me, I'd speak to them, and there was generally about 6 or 7 a month. But the way that they would do it, it's quite a good idea really, is everybody who wrote in a particular issue, they all had to proofread the whole issue. And so then you get feedback from all the different writers. And so some people might pick up on something that someone else hasn't. So that was kind of part of the deal. And I think I had to do one because I think I got an article into an American Free Press once. And the reason I mention that is simply because, of course, when you've got Tex Mars and all his staff going through it and then redoing the cover slightly, and it all looked a lot more professional, and then adding an index, which I never did. I thought indexing something would be really difficult. Actually, it's a lot easier than you think, and even on Microsoft Word, I wouldn't remember how to do it now, but there is a certain way you do it on Word, and once you apply it, you have to mess about a bit for a while, but once that's done, it'll remember all your numbering and stuff like that. So that was kind of how that book came about. And essentially what the book is it starts off in 750 AD with Khazaria, and then it sort of it jumps a few, there's the odd bit here every century, so I don't want to try and sell it on things that don't exist. It really pretty much kicks off in 1750, 1780, something like that, when you've got the original Rothschild changing his name from Bauer to Rothschild, and it really gets going in the 1800s. That's where I would say the book mainly starts and takes you all the way up till 2011, when I did an updated, expanded version that's still available now at moneytreepublishing.com. That's the only place I'm aware of that you can get it. You sometimes find it on, eBay, places like that, but I think they're looking for silly money. I think you can still get the original copy, the one that Tex Mars did, at powerofprophecy.com. They are still offering it last time I looked. So that might be a good bet for people who... I know that Money Tree Publishing are struggling with a payment processor at the moment. So if you're overseas, it's obviously going to be more difficult to order, because you're not just going to be able to put a credit card through, whereas you should be able to with the likes of Power of Prophecy. So you could go for the original there if you wanted. But obviously the updated version has got the most in it. And then after I did that, I've got an interest in the Bible, but my interest in the Bible, it's another reason I started this parable series, because there's very few. We've all heard of Jesus Christ's parables, but I could name you maybe a couple, but there are about 40 of them, as I say.
Yeah, you surprised me when you said that in the intro there. I thought that's really... And it's funny you bring it... Well, I suppose everything's funny when you think it's coincidental, but I was talking to someone the other day about parables. You go on. I'll come back. I haven't forgot. I just said that to myself so that I remember what I'm going to say in a minute's time or something. They're pretty important things,
Yeah, it's weird, because the first one I kicked off with, and it took me ages to decipher it, and it's the parable of the barren fig tree, and I'd never heard of it. And so I was doing research, and the other problem is you start doing research online today, and you're going to get it's not as easy as doing research 10, 15 years ago, before you had all this infiltration and corrupting of search engines, so that The
Yeah.
answers that they want you to get are at the top, so you don't know if you're basically being led down the garden path with something. And then I ran this by uh, Dr. Peter Hammond, actually, before the show on Tuesday, because I said, there's an element in me that is laziness by not going through every parable each week and coming up with my interpretation of it. But I also felt that what does my interpretation matter? Because what should matter really with something like the parables is it is the words of Jesus Christ, and so it's up to the person who hears them to interpret them how they believe. And if I say something um, and I'm not correct, then I've already influenced the listener as to how to interpret it. I don't think that that's right. I think that they should be able to interpret it directly from what Jesus Christ said. So that was another feeling on that. But the reason I mention that is that my second book, I decided I wanted to do something on the Bible. But what I wanted out of the Bible is the Bible is obviously not just a very big book, it's 66 books. Some of them are quite short, some of them are very lengthy. And then you've got the apocryphal books that were removed, and we don't need to go into them to confuse it further. But what I was interested in from the Bible was who the children of God are, who these other people are that are the enemies of the children of God, that is mentioned in Genesis 3:15, that there's going to be some hatred between these two groups.
Yeah.
I wanted to identify them. I wanted to know what the laws of the Bible were, because I kept hearing these people talking about the 759 laws, statutes, ordinances, and the judgments for breaking those in the Bible. So I could see how that compared with the laws that we live under today. I also wanted to know about the teachings of Jesus Christ, and I was very curious, being someone who was interested in conspiracies anyway, what these end times prophecies and things like that were all about. So I put a book together called In the Name of Yahweh, which essentially took all that information out of the Bible and put it in one 200-page book. And
Right.
to this day, when I was, well, not to this day, up to say a couple of years ago when I was still a regular on shows before I stepped back from being a guest on shows, I would generally have that next to me, ready to look something up if I needed to, rather than the Bible, because the information I'd already taken out of the Bible, it was more, I knew about it, knew where to look for it.
Yes.
And what I noticed recently is there's a lot more people in the independent media talking about the Bible, talking about scripture and what have you. And I've maintained for a few years that In the Name of Yahweh was a more important book than the Synagogue of Satan, but it can be a rather dry read. For example, all the the Bible verses I use are from the King James Bible.
Yeah.
And I mean, even when I read out the parable, the barren fig tree, last Sunday, there was this word cumbereth, and then there was something else that followed it that made it like a tongue twister. So even when I read that, I kind of tripped over myself then. And then you're reading Christ's words as well, so you feel even more guilty. And then rereading it to try and get it right. But the reason I go with the King James is that there's no Bible that is perfect. But the King James, you have these big concordances that number all the words in the King James, and then you can get ones that have got a Greek dictionary, Aramaic dictionary, what have you, and you can look up the words and see how they're defined. And so, for example, when Eve is alleged to have ate an apple in the garden, what she actually said was to God was, "The serpent beguiled me and I did eat." And what that means, beguiled means seduce, and eat means lay with. So the serpent seduced me and I laid with him. And that led to her becoming pregnant with Cain. And then she ended up introducing what she just learned from this serpent to Adam, which led to her becoming pregnant with Abel. And you wouldn't know any of that from certainly sitting down at school or in a church and being told that Eve ate an apple in the garden, and I'm not aware of any Bible that's in. But even when you go to the next part, beguiled me and I did eat, it's still not clear. Although beguiled, I think many of us, that's some sort of negative term there. That it's not something positive that's been done to you. And that's why, just an example of why I would go off that. Because if, for example, I did another Bible, I wouldn't be able to go through a concordance with it and be able to look those words up.
Yeah.
But
Which concordance? I mean, the only one I'm aware of, Andy, I suppose, is Strong's, but there must be many. Was that the one that you used in looking at word definitions?
But
right.
there's the Strong's one. It's called the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible. It was still there. I'll see if I can find it while I'm talking, because it's on Amazon and it was still there last time I looked. But the most important thing in it, more than the concordance, is the dictionaries in it. And then you can look up the various words. And basically it is, we don't really have phone books anymore, but it's like the size of a couple of phone books. It's probably the size of like a Yellow Pages, something like that, hardback. So it's the strongest Strongs.
The strongest Strong sounds like a mint. Yeah. Super strong Strongs.
Oh, here it is. I completely typed it all up wrong, but it actually came up good on Amazon. The top result, and it actually says here purchased October 2014, which was after I wrote In the Name of Yahweh. But the new Strong's Expanded Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible by James Strong, hardcover, £32.32p on Amazon.co.uk at the moment. That's the one that I use, and it seems good. And there's a large print version below that I probably need more now. But I don't know if that's got everything. No, because that's exhaustive concordance, but you want the expanded exhaustive concordance. You can always use a magnifying glass if need be. I think I can still see these things.
These are very long descriptive terms to describe. Very, very long terms, aren't they? I mean, you mentioned earlier, you were talking that, I think you mentioned it to me before, I think it's pretty straightforward, that Synagogue of Satan basically has always outsold In the Name of Yahweh. Probably because of... Yeah, I mean, and yet, obviously, both terms are biblical. Addressing sort of they're looking in different directions, I guess, which is it's quite interesting that you've come to that. I mean, I'm assuming you probably didn't plan it that way; it's just unfolded that way. But it's still very interesting to see that you've got these two opposites in your oeuvre, your body of work. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a very small body of work because it's only 2 books.
Yeah, but Andy, most people don't have any body of work, so I think it's fantastic, And parables, I wanted to just mention, I was talking to someone the other day about parables, because this whole thing, you're mentioning there this lack of insight that people would have with regards to the Garden of Eden story if they don't understand the true definitions of certain words. And of course, I concur heartily with what you said. I never learned anything like that at school when I was young, nor was it ever explained or propositioned to me in that way at churches or by anybody. You get this kind of surface version of the story and just go along with it because, you're more interested in kicking a football probably when you're 11 and 12. I think that was probably the case for me. But as the years go by, you look at these things and you realize that they're actually saying something else. When you realize what they're actually saying, it's very difficult, very different. And I think parables are interesting, not only in terms of the content of them, and I'm fascinated to know that there are 41, and I now need to go and grab them. But I'm always, my mind comes back to that interaction, and I'm going to mull at this because I can't actually quote it chapter and verse or anything. We know that in addressing crowds, Christ often spoke in parables, and I think the disciples question him about this, possibly repeatedly, but certainly there's certainly a moment when they do. And his response is something along the lines of, I speak in parables because it's not, what I'm saying is only for you, it's not for lots of other people that are in the crowd. It's not for them. I guess you're familiar with that. I've completely sort of, brought it down to a very basic level. And that's a very important thing to
No,
know.
you are right. Yeah, it was. It's interesting because some of the parables really are, and I struggle to work them out. But some of them, not every parable is unclear. Unclear. For example, I think the parable of the wheat and the tares is pretty clear
Crystal
as to
clear.
what's going on. It's
Yeah.
just the identifying the different groups. That's the unclear element that one has to work out.
Hmm.
But certain things like, as I say, well, I can read it to you actually. That might, if you, I'll just before I do, I'll just because this is very short, and then you can see if you would like to take the barren fig tree test, Paul. But it's essentially what I was getting to, and I keep
I'm
going
very
round in
nervous
circles, so I
now.
do apologise. But when I put in the Synagogue of Satan together, I was so excited. I kind of said years ago, and like this was before I was a Christian or anything like that. I just said, could you just let me know what's really going on? That's what I just want to know, what's really going on out there, what the truth is. Could you just let me know what the truth is? And I felt that I'd found it historically with the Synagogue of Satan. It was a very exciting book because you could be, reading about 9/11 one minute and then, JFK the next, and then Nixon and what really went on there, and all these other different things that, you know, all sorts of little facts here and there that I picked up. And so it makes for a fast read. And at the time, more and more people were waking up to what was really, going on in the world. And I think that's what prompted the Barack Obama White House move to get this guy. Oh, hopefully his name will come to me, but spent millions, if not billions, on getting a group together to essentially combat all these revelations coming up on the internet about what really happened in history and how it compares to the
Hmm.
official version of events. The name is Cass Sunstein, or
Right.
Cass Suns. You probably heard of his
I
name.
know the name, yeah.
Yeah, he headed up some project by the Obama administration to come up with ways of essentially derailing people waking up to what was really going on. And there have been allegations by people in the independent media. I remember um, certain things suddenly started derailing where things were going about 10 years ago, or maybe even before that. And that was all engineered. So a lot of the so-called independent media sites you see today are just gatekeepers designed to give you some of the information, but
Yeah.
most critically not tell you, who the real culprits are, try and divert you there.
There's
But
been,
an
there's
example,
been an absolute boom as well in the number of those sites over the COVID, let's call it the COVID period. Everybody and his dog seems to be a streamer, knows everything and are telling you stuff. I mean, for some of us who've been around this, us seasoned individuals, and this sounds awfully patronizing, but it's tedious beyond belief. I mean, I can't be bothered with most of it. It's ridiculous, most of it. But I guess the positive is that many of them are coming to this stuff, I assume, I'm going to take them for face value, for the first time and are enthused with it all. But I still think, as you say, that there are a considerable number of effectively, compromised websites, let's put it that way. There's too much fear porn, not enough constructive communication, in my view. I think there are things that we can do, but they're not. If we don't talk about them much, people forget that there are things that we ought to be doing or could be doing. A lot of it's just alarmist stuff. It's true, but it's still alarmist and doesn't help.
yes, no, you're absolutely right. And yeah, so essentially where we are, I'll give you an example as well of this sort of thing. I've been hearing a lot in the last week of different shows in the independent media that a law has apparently passed in Congress. Of course, it has to go to the Senate to become law. That they will, what I'm being told on these independent shows is they're going to start censoring parts of the New Testament that certain people don't like. So it'll
Hmm.
be against the law to even quote them. And I, as I say, when I reflect on In the Name of Yahweh and how what it was doing when I was on Lulu, I would sell 4 copies for every 60 I'd sell 4 in the name of Yahweh's for every 60 synagogue of Satan's. And that goes to show how lacking in popularity in the name of Yahweh was. And I always
Yeah.
remember one comment I saw in a review saying, it's hard to imagine the guy that did the synagogue of Satan put this together, that in the name of Yahweh was terrible. And of course, it's a very different book, but the difference between the writing process on both is, whereas the synagogue of Satan, I was just really doing it for me. I just wanted my own record. So, all right, there's a show on about Kennedy. Well, I've listened to lots of shows on Kennedy, and I'm pretty happy with the interpretation I've got down here. If there's there was a new figure came out in recent years claiming to have done the assassination, all this sort of stuff, and I still am happy with all the work I put into it. So it was kind of my own personal record of my research that
Yeah.
ended up becoming a book. When I did In the Name of Yahweh, it was still it was for me, but it was always going to go out as a book as well. So I wanted to know all the things that I laid out at the start of the show from the Bible, and I felt it would be big enough for a book. It was it literally came in at just under 200 pages, so it couldn't have been a lot shorter, otherwise it wouldn't have made it as a book. But now, with seeing things like this, as I say, people are saying that's going to, they're going to ban you quoting things from the Bible. But you type in Congress pass law to censor the Bible into Google, which I've just done, and USA Today, no, the House didn't pass bill to outlaw the New Testament and all this and this. It's all one-sided that you're seeing coming down. So I'm not sure what the truth is, but it's interesting to me how that book is now it's become more of its time with what's going on today, with so many people in the independent media talking about Jesus Christ and Christianity and all these different things, than it was when it came out in 2011 it originally came out.
Yeah, I noticed that trend that you've identified. I've noticed it as well. People that probably wouldn't have talked about it 5 or 6 years ago now mention it more easily. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the process. I think it's almost perfect what's taking place. I think it is an inexorable sort of movement towards things. I mean, just coming back to this thing about parables as well, and about, I say to people, I've mentioned it elsewhere on this show in previous episodes, when people say, they'll ask me, have you read the Bible? I say, well, in bits all over the place. And I go to, if I see a reference to it that's about something that I'm sort of inquiring into at that time, I go to it and look at it and see exactly what we're going to get. But I generally say to people, I advise them to not read it, not forever, but until they've got the right context for it. And I think Christ speaking in parables is part of a major part of the context for the document that people aren't aware of, because, just repeating what I said, he said, it's for your ears, not for theirs. And this immediately tells you, for those who is paying attention in it, that there's a distinction, that this proposition, for want of a better word, the narrative of Scripture is directed at a particular group of people and is not for all people. And this runs completely counter to, I suspect, all of the organized Christian church systems. I suspect all. There's hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, because everybody's got their own slight variation on this, that, and the other. Okay, that's kind of what happens with human beings in organizations. They move away from things that they start off close to. It tends to happen everywhere. But that's a fundamental one. I mean, that was the main sort of insight I got. I think round about the period, when I met you and when I was talking to Pastor Eli James at the same time, and reading lots of other things, and reading plenty of other books that he sent my way, particularly much of the archaeological research done by all these British guys in the 1800s, nailing down who these people really were that are addressed in the book. And of course, a very, very different, a 180 degrees different narrative comes out of it. And I can only say today it's the correct one, because it ticks all the boxes, whereas the universalist one is part of the problem, is it not? It's massively part of the problem that people go, No, the stories in this book are there for everybody. Jesus loves everyone, right? I go. And you have to ask people to point out in the narrative where he says that. And of course, he doesn't. It's not in there. This is a brutal thing for most sort of standard Christians to hear. I don't think I can understand why they wouldn't like it. I'm just asking a question. Can you show me where it says what you're saying it says? Because I'm unable to find it. Have you been able to find that, Andy? That this book is for everyone?
Well, that's the great debate now, isn't it? And that's another area where they're wanting to go down, because it's almost they had their own people in the mainstream, as they did with their own people in the mainstream media, telling people what they wanted them to hear and telling them the understanding they wanted people to believe. But unfortunately, more and more people are looking at it for themselves and coming up with the actual truth and not the fake truth that the powers that be have put out there. And that would be, for my money, why they're now looking to censor it, because they don't censor something until it becomes a problem for them. That's what I've noticed in my experience. And so that's why I think that they are now looking at it today, because, as you said, so many people are talking about it. But just I'll just give you this first parable that I did, which is the barren fig tree, which I really didn't understand. But I'll just, it's only 3 chapters, 4 chapters, sorry, don't worry, I'll be here all night if it was chapters. It's Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9, the barren fig tree. Here we go. He spake also this parable, and the rest of what I'm going to say is Jesus Christ's words. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Then he said unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down, why cumbereth it the ground? And he answering said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it. And if it bear fruit, well, and if not, then after that thou shalt cut it down. And apparently what this means is it concerns a man who's trying to change his ways. And God comes to him. He still hasn't changed his ways. And he asks God, not just asks him for more time, but says, look, can you just give me more time, like, say, another year? And if I haven't changed then please disregard me then. And so the message behind it essentially is that God is patient with people to stop sinning, to change their ways, to follow him, what have you. But that patience has a time limit. And so it's important to kind of, if you are unhappy with any aspects of your life that you're living and you want to change them, it's best to try and do it sooner rather than later. Now, that is apparently what that means. Now that I've been told that explanation, I can kind of see how that could be interpreted in that manner. But without seeing the explanation, I admit I would have been totally baffled by that parable.
Yeah, I think I would too. I wasn't sort of thinking down those lines with regards to patience. I've often thought that God's patience is almost infinite. But maybe there's a time, there's a season for all things, and you do have to get a move on. And if you don't get a move on, it can get a bit uncomfortable. That's putting it mildly. I think it does go that way. I think it has to, because I think part of it as well is that there is a meaning to all of this. I know people run around going, no, I don't know whether there's a God. I have these conversations, sometimes with people who can't bring themselves to sort of look at it more fully, being of a more, I suppose you would call, science or logic-oriented viewpoint. I'm not against science or logic. They're all parts in the toolkit, but they're not, for me, at all capable of answering the really big questions. They're very good at explaining how things work, and they're very useful. Of course, our so-called civilization's built on much of that logic and the application of knowledge of materials and how they behave and all this kind of stuff. But in terms of why all this exists, science is a complete loss. And I do mean complete. It's a total loss. And it just gets cross about it. Scientists get cross about the fact that you ask them these questions and therefore you're a Herbert for doing such a thing. But they just need a bit more humility. And I think the really great scientists do have that. They let go of all of that stuff. And the ones that really look into things see that there is the hand of a creator. There is the hand of the Almighty in things. And, we're only equipped to know things up to a certain point. Seems to me that, the whole thing is about improving our behavior to some degree. And when you do improve your behavior, I think as an individual, you are pleased about it. Pleased is possibly not the right word, but you recognize maybe that you're growing and improving in terms of the quality of your behavior, with regards to so many more people. When you're young, you're a bit taken up with yourself, as you should be. and it's a great joy, but it's a different one to what occurs as you become seasoned. It seems to me if you don't ask questions throughout life, it's going to get more and more challenging as you go on. And I'm looking forward, really, Andy, to hearing the rest of these parables. It's just, as I said, the principle for me is the fact that he's speaking in them to deny understanding to other people is a key part. Because I hear, and you've no doubt heard, oh, well, it's for everybody and we can all come to Christ and everything's going to be great. And I'm going, but he didn't say that. That's not what he says. He doesn't say that at all. So who comes up with this idea that it's for everyone? Maybe I'm out of order. I don't think I am, though. It seems cruel what I'm saying as well. It seems, no, you can't get involved with this because the invite didn't go to you. And that is the truth of the narrative, is it not? I mean, I quote this one regularly from Henry Ford, where he says, most Christians read their Bible through Jewish spectacles and therefore read it wrong. And this is true because of the context that people go to the book. That's why I tend to say to people, don't read it. Not until you got the context right. The content's going to be completely misunderstood, and I operate on the basis that much of the content has been misunderstood and will continue to be misunderstood without the context. And what you're talking about here with them getting heavy with it now, these rumours of banning it, are because I feel more and more people are now reading these documents, with a much better context. I'm not saying that I'm 100% accurate and correct about all of these things, but I think I'm committing less error when I read it in my understanding of it than I've ever done. And that's a good thing. That makes me feel satisfied, I'm less wrong about it today than I was yesterday, which is no bad thing.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing that, I don't want to sound all touchy-feely here,
Ooh.
but with a parable like this, is that interpretation I gave, and that was on research. I looked at other people suggesting it. That might all be wrong, or someone might get something from it initially, and then that might change. And that has happened to me. The title, The Synagogue of Satan, I chose that title because I was familiar with a book by Arthur Kessler called The 13th Tribe, where he basically said that he was a Jewish writer, and he said that 90% of the people who call themselves Jewish today are Ashkenazi Jews, and they are a tribe of people from Eastern Europe that weren't genetically Jewish. They were Sephardic Jews that were genetically Jewish, but they converted to Judaism in 740 AD under the edict of their king, King Bulan, because he had Christians on one side of him and Muslims on the other, and they kept invading and causing him all sorts of trouble. But one group that used to come through his territory with no problem, be able to go into each of those territories, were the Jews who practiced Judaism, which is why I decided that Judaism, as he's in between these two groups, if he could convert his people to that, then he'd be safer than converting to Christianity and then getting more people invading from the Muslim side, or Islam and getting more people invading from the Christian side. But that was my reason for choosing the title. I thought that that's what it meant. Beware of those Khazarians who say they are Jews but are not, but
Yes.
are the synagogue of Satan. But after I wrote the book, and many years afterwards, I now interpret it differently. I Because the Jews regularly say that they're the chosen people, so I say be yeah beware of those who say they are the chosen people but are not. And then it's still that broader group, because of course uh, you look at all the people that go along to get along, and there's been this there's a lot of people out there that will try and bookmark everybody into a certain racial group when they're not, but they might go along with members of that group if it's financially beneficial for them to do so.
Yes.
And so the Synagogue of Satan for me is a very broad group that covers a wide range of. It has a certain group at its core, not all of that group, but it attracts people from all sorts of other groups who are prepared to go along with the principles which are kind of listed in the book of Revelation, what they're going to do, etc., 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 and how that mirrors a lot of what we see happening in the world today. And
Absolutely.
so that's an example of how I've misinterpreted the Bible to come up with the title of a book. But actually, when I got the interpretation right, I would still have chosen it as the title for that book. It still fits. So God didn't want me to know what it really meant when I chose it, but he had it there ready for me to learn what it really meant, and so it was still the right title, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. I wouldn't say you're in error or your interpretation was wrong. I think interpretations are what you've got at the moment, aren't they? It seems to me it's a process of if one diligently keeps working away at this stuff, which I think it gets into your bones or whatever part of your anatomy you find as a useful analogy, but it gets into you. You're really, I think, improving your focus. You're able to see more detail at a deeper level, and you'll also be able to see the connected threads that have brought us to this point. In the end, there is a basic truth about it that could be communicated to many people on a basic level, but the nuancing or the details help considerably because they give you a sort of strength if you're called upon to communicate about it. I was with Sussex Man the other day. Maybe I mentioned this on the show last week. No, I can't have done. It was on Saturday morning, so I probably didn't. And just at the weekend, I popped over to see him, and we often talk about these sorts of things as well when we're together, and English common law and all of the other connective threads that come into this, through the history line. But we ended up talking to a chap who informed me that race doesn't exist, which was quite an interesting sentence to hear. I know there are people out there that say sentences like that. I can't really take that sentence seriously. It's not to I just view, well, that's where the person's thinking is at this time. But it's not possible to have for me to have a conversation with people who've taken that view. I can be polite. I can not be rude. I'm never rude. I don't try to be rude to people. What's the point? It's not very effective unless I'm really in a mare of a mood. But as you get older, that seems to be happening less and less, which is a good thing, I think. And I said, well, look, if you brought people in from different races, which you say don't exist, and brought them into this hall and asked the people here if they saw people of different races in front of them, they would all say yes. I said, so if it's not possible to see what is actually in front of your own eyes, and I think the truth is that for many of us throughout much of our life, it hasn't been. There's that old phrase, who are you going to believe? What they say or your own eyes? And it's getting to grips with your own eyes that's the big challenge. Know thyself is true. It's absolutely, it's an important foundational sort of stance that you have to take. If you're going to have any chance, as it were, opportunity to become acquainted with the truth, you've got to know how you're going to deal with it. And I think these things are so important because so many people think they're addressing everyone. I think, you mentioned about Mark Collett. I think when I was on with him, it's a couple of years ago, there was a little section where we were just talking about the word we, because we use the word we a lot. Yeah, when I'm using the word we, I'm only addressing my kith and kin, really, because I'm not in a position to address people who are not in my kith and kin because I'm not one of them. This is not a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's an actuality. It's a truth of life. And one has to say, or I tend to say, well, do I think the Almighty got it wrong? No, I don't. I don't feel that it's wrong. It must be correct because this is the way that it is. But there are groups out there, the Synagogue of Satan, for example, whose a part of their stance is, we know more than God. God got it wrong. We know better. The minds of men are the thing you need to follow, not the heart of God. And there lies ruin, it seems to me. And we're in that period right now, as evidenced, by, as you say, what's contained in the book of Revelation. So, I tend to view it as a pragmatic book. It's a book of law. It's pragmatic. And if you don't deal with it at the level of basic pragmatics and robust truths, I'm using the word robust to mean massively politically incorrect truths. But if you can't get to grips with those, you're going to be lost reading it. You're going to come out the other side with a really dippy hippie view of the whole thing, and it will still not yield up much bounty. Will it? Or will it? I don't know. Doesn't seem to me. Anyway, Andy, we're about an hour into the show, according to my clock here. And as you know, as is our wont here, when we're live, and of course we're not...
Before we...
Yeah, sure. I was just going to ask you to pick one. It's okay. Yeah, jump in.
Literally, I've got one line left, and then we can start with a completely different topic in the second hour because we've kind of
please
finished
do. Yeah,
this one.
Finish up. Yeah, great.
So, firstly, I'd just like to pay a tribute to Sussex Man because he was the first person in this country I met who I had similar views to on the scripture. And I first met him because he was attending a church at the time that used to, sell its own literature, not for profit, what have you. And I was bringing up my books to him, which were some of the 500 I self-printed before I got printed by Tex Mars back in 2006. So, and that was around this time of year, I think, coming into November, December, something like that. So literally about 18 years ago. So, yeah, he was the first person that I met. The other thing that I was just going to quickly bring up was this here. No, what you said, rather, when you talked about scientists. And this just, for everybody listening, we've just had these terrible floods in Spain, in Valencia. And I heard about them earlier in the week. A few people apparently reported dead. And then it was 60, and now it's like 95. They're really bad.
Yes.
Okay, but it's only happened in the last few days. This is a headline from the Daily Mail from yesterday. Why Valencia's floods are so catastrophic. Scientists blame climate change for the torrential rains that sparked one of Spain's worst ever natural disasters. Now, they don't know that it's climate change, right? But that's what they're basically told to say. It's not scientific to say it. They've not been to the area even. Do you know what I mean? They've got to see how that all built up. They've got all these different sides. Oh, no, but it's climate change straight away. Just like all these scientists in this age of COVID. Oh, no, this is safe and effective. And then we've got all these people dying that they're now having to come up with a new compensation scheme because so many people are injured. Well, how many of these people wouldn't have been injured if they'd have been honest in the first place? But for some reason, there was a group above them that seemed to have control of so many of them that they could roll them out into the mainstream media and make people believe that this stuff was safe. And so many people have found it to their detriment. So it just goes to show that when you see all these experts here and scientists there, and then you look into what their background is, you suddenly find out that in order for them to get funding, they get approached to write a paper and they get told what the conclusion of that paper is that they write. So long as the paper that you write gives scientific proof of this that we want to call true, then we'll give you the funding. And if it doesn't, we won't, And that's how it works. And then with doctors as well, you can look at it to the extent of it's 4 years worth of student loans if you go to university. Well, with medical school on top, that makes it 8. And so you imagine it's only the super rich who are going to be able to be doctors. And how many of the super rich go on to have children that are doctors, they're more likely to end up in, banks or stuff like that where they earn more money. And so what's the likelihood of a doctor being threatened that actually if you do, express any reservations, you might have found out that some of these people that have been jabbed have had reactions to them. If you try warning the public, then you might not be a doctor any longer. And what are you going to do about all these student loans you've had for 8 years that you've got to pay back? And we know that there are doctors out there who came and spoke out and they were struck off by the BMA, British Medical Association.
Yeah.
So you can see how this whole thing knits together as to you play the party line or we'll get you one way or another. And I'll shut up now, Paul. So
no. Yeah, no, that's fine. So, that's really useful. Because obviously, we mentioned it earlier, the term conspiracy theorist is bandied around. But my riposte to that usually is, no, conspiracy analyst. There is a difference. And that's what you just did.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. No, it's absolutely spot on. Let's play a song. You can explain this afterwards. We take a break, so we're just over an hour in according to my clock. Here you're listening to Paul English Live here on WBN 324 Radio Soapbox and elsewhere, but it's not quite live. I mean, we're alive right now whilst we're doing this recording, but this is a pre-record but being conducted on October the 31st. Here's a song. We'll give you the title and everything afterwards. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, and we'll be back after this.
Susan Summers is me name. For 14 years transported was for taking off some game. As for us wretched females, we never see a man, though there's 20 to 1 woman on Van Diemen's land. There's poor Tom Brown from Nottingham, Jack Williams and poor Joe. They were all daring poachers, as the country well does know. At night they were trepended by the keepers out of hand. For 14 years transported to Van Diemen's land. When we set sail from England, we landed in the bay. We had rotten straw for bedding, we dared not to say nay. Our cots were fenced with wire, we slumber when we can to drive away the wolves upon Van Diemen's land. Come on, you gallant poachers, give ear unto me song. It is a bit of good advice, although it is not long. Laying by your dog and snare, to you I do speak plain. If you knew the hardships, you'd never poach again. Thursday we landed upon that fatal shore. The planters they came flocking round, 20 score and more. They banked the men like horses and sold them out of hand, then yoked them to the plough all on Van Diemen's land. Sleeping, I have a pleasant dream with me dear one. I'm sitting down by some purling stream with me friends, telling stories around me they all stand. But I wake up broken hearted on Van Diemen's land. Come on, you gallant poachers, give ear unto me song. It is a bit of good
That was fabulous. What was that, Andy?
That was Van Diemen's Land by Steeleye Span. Started off as like a folk band, I think, in the late 1960s in the UK, and they've had numerous lineups changes over the years. The lead singer is Maddie Pryor. She's remained constant throughout, and she's married to one of the members of the band as well. And it was from a 2004 album, and they're still going, to my knowledge, called They Called Her Babylon. And anything else you'd like to say about it before I give a bit more background?
I just loved it. It was fantastic. I've never heard it before. It's great. I mean, when we ask the guests, as it were, to throw up a song or two, I try to not listen to it, particularly if I've not heard it. This way, you get my genuine reaction in time. But I loved that. That was fabulous. I never heard it before. So there you go. See, I'm a musical ignoramus in certain areas, and that's one of them. But that was wonderful. Yeah, I did look up. I mean, I thought Van Diemen's Land is referring to what we now know as Tasmania. Is that right? I think it is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Tasmania. Yeah, brilliant song. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, and I couldn't remember her name, Maddie Pryor. She's still alive then, and still rocking on, still singing songs.
Well, I saw the tour of that particular album, and
Yeah.
how that, and I saw her live then, and she's very, very nice. For example, a lot of these people go back to like the 60s, and there was a woman at the front. It was Salisbury City Hall, which was a nice venue, not too big, not too small. And there was a woman at the front who got into a certain part of the music and waving a sort of scarf around, and Maddie Pryor got down and sort of danced with her. Do you see what I mean? And stuff like that. So she was very engaging, not all hoity-toity. She was quite happy to, participate as well. And what led me to that was years ago, as you would look around the internet all those years ago, and you get at that point of an evening or whenever it is, and what am I going to look at now? For some reason, when I was younger, my real father, he was a salesman, and he was an advertising manager for Macmillan Publishers, and he worked on the Nature magazine, which a lot of people have heard of. And he used to fly to America a fair bit. And I always loved my music, so he'd always bring me back a record. And one of the records he brought me back was by a duo called Nicole and Marsh. And I always remember the song. It was called Streets of the Angels, and I loved it. It never sort of did anything over here or what have you. And I started looking them up. And there was a guy called Ken Nicol, who was one half of it, who was a singer and a guitarist. I found he had a website, got in touch with him, said about this single and stuff. And I'd since found the album as well, like at a record fair, and I liked the album. It was off. And he wrote back to me, and we got in touch, and we started communicating and what have you. And I essentially, I started ordering some albums from him. He's actually been a guest on my show a couple of times, and he ended up being asked to be the guitarist in Steeleye Span, which he's mainly does solo stuff, but he did that for a while and then went off to do more solo stuff. And when he joined them, he was involved in writing that song that you just heard,
Right.
and also played on that tour. And I think he did another album or two with them. And so he was able. It's the only time I think I've ever been given a free, what they call it, a backstage pass and all that with the free ticket and
like
stuff
that,
like
is
that.
it?
So yeah,
Yeah.
it was. So I went and saw them, and then when I went backstage, another guy that was there was the author Terry Pratchett, who many people will have heard of.
Yeah.
I'd never really read any of his stuff. My girlfriend was reading his stuff at the time, so I asked him if he signed something, just a piece of paper to give to my girlfriend because she liked his books. And so that was how all that really came about. And it's nice when you sort of get in a situation like that, and something that goes back to my childhood. And Ken's still putting out good music to this day, and I think his website is kennicol.co.uk. I'll just check that out for people. That was really the background to that.
Well, I love it. It's full of all those sort of English folk motifs and things, and it's just got. I'll be listening to that quite a bit, Andy. That's going to be on the Actually, I was going to say it was going to be on my car stereo, which is and a very old-fashioned way of saying things, but it won't be. 'Cause my car blew up the other day. Literally, it made a sound. I have never had that happen before. It went bang, and smoke started to come out of the front. It still moves around a little bit. Anyway, people don't want to know about my car problems. You've probably all got your own car problems, haven't you? But good grief. Anyway, I've resisted the temptation to have it towed away and examined because I've got an idea what it is. And I think the bill that they're going to tell me down the telephone line is not something that I want to hear. It might be something I can't even do anything about. It's probably going to be that big. So I'm leaving the car alone at the moment. I don't need it every day. And we're a house of several cars. So I've been, one of my sons said, "Oh, Dad, you're insured on my car." Actually, I had a wonderful little chat with him. I said, I'm ruminating, about what I anticipate to be this hefty bill. He said, "Don't do it." He said, buy it. He said, "You need to buy a car." I said, "You get one, probably cheaper than the repair job." This is serious, by the way, because it's going to be thick end of 12 or 1,500 quid, I think. And I'm just going, gulp. Which bank do I rob for that? And there aren't any banks left, to rob, as you well know. And then he said to me, "What you need?" He said, "You need to buy a car like mine." And I looked at him, I said, "I did buy your car." He went, "Oh, yeah." It's quite funny. It was a birthday present about 4 years ago. Fantastic little runabout for hardly any miles on it. Anyway, there we go. So I've been going around in that, and it's very, very small compared to mine. I don't like small cars too much. They're very nice, fun little go-karts on short drives, but on the long stuff, not so much fun. Anyway, I tooled over, by the way, to see Sussex Man the other day in this car. So my bacon has been saved a little bit. I'm not completely without motorised transport, but I'm just umming and ahhing about what to do about the current machine. And I've mentioned here on the show before, what I'm really after, Andy, is I want an old Volvo 240DL diesel, and then I want to find a local engineer to fix it so that it'll run on water. I just say that on purpose so that we come up on the alarm screen somewhere. We need one of those things to do it. And I was looking at the prices of them. The Volvo 240DL is very boxy. It's that box. You remember the box Volvos, like tanks and everything? They cost a bomb. Like the cheapest one I could find was $9,000 for one that had 147,000 miles on the clock. Mind you, they are Volvos. They'll do 500,000 miles if you look after them properly. But I kind of fancy a car like that. The great irony as well is that in the early 90s, when I was in my early 30s and not interested in Volvo 240DLs at all, I had my eyes on a sports car, which I subsequently got a couple of years later because, I'm still 30 and think like that. I had one. I had this 240DL for about a year. Somebody said, "Hey, run around in this." And of course it wasn't the most attractive vehicle at the time to be driving around in. But now it appears to be extremely attractive to me if I could get my hands on one. So that's what we need. Nice basic cars to do away with all this climate change claptrap and all this nonsense with these battery cars, which are complete junk. And how things change in your mind with the passing of time and what your priorities are. Anyway, my car witterings aside, that song was fantastic. Brilliant. Really loved it. So I won't be playing it in my car anyway, Andy, because I currently don't have one. So there we go. Now, I mentioned we've still got a little bit of time left, about 45 minutes or so. I think you may have heard me a couple of months ago. I did a little sort of thing here, which was a party political broadcast by the political party that does not exist. It's just a little notion that I've got floating around in my head. And I've knocked this one up. This is about 7 minutes, actually. It's a bit longer than I intended, but I'm going to play it anyway because it could lead us in then, Andy, to talking about the recent budget that's been delivered here in the UK, of which I know very little. But I think it might lead us into a discussion about farming and that kind of stuff. So if you want to sit back, put yourself on mute and do whatever you want to do, I'm going to play this through for the next 7 minutes or so. And it's pretty self-explanatory what it's about. I've touched on these themes before. It's really about banking, actually, and why having a budget under its current form is probably pretty futile. So here we go. There now follows a response to the recent UK budget. This communication being made on behalf of the political party that does not exist. but that you may wish did exist once you have heard what it has to say. Hello. This recording was made a few days prior to the UK budget of October the 30th, 2024. It does not, therefore, deal with the specifics of that budget, though by now there will likely have been many strong criticisms of whatever changes have been sold to the British public as cures for our economic ills. We were forewarned by the newly installed Labour government that it would be a tough budget for us all, the reason given being the economic irresponsibility of the previous government, a charge that is wheeled out every time a new government conducts its first budget. It is always the other party's fault. It is our view that whatever the specifics of this budget, it will, like all previous economic plans, prove to be fundamentally irrelevant with regard to improving the prosperity, well-being and happiness of British families. Irrelevant because the root cause of our economic woes does not lie in economic policy, no matter which party made it, but is to be found in the operations of the UK banking system. These operations start with the Bank of England. The bank was formed in August of 1694, a month when hardly any MPs were present, as most of them were also farmers and were away bringing in the harvest. The bank therefore started under a cloak of mystery and intrigue, and this cloak has remained in place to this day. It is our contention that budgets are ineffective as they do not address the banking issue. The budget we all need to hear, that is, all of us except the private bankers, begins with the transformation of the central bank. In simple terms, ownership of the bank needs to be held by you and all other Britons, and not by a group of private banking concerns. This is a challenging proposal for most Britons to take on board. Not surprising, given that none of us have been educated about how the bank works, who owns it, and to what ends. And this, to our misfortune, unfortunately also includes most MPs, who remain clueless about this vital component in the management of the nation. Budgets are like painting a house to make it look good, whilst failing to see that the foundations are rotten to the core. Reginald McKenna had this to say: "I am afraid the ordinary citizen will not like to be told that the banks can and do create money, and they who control the credit of the nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people." That's you, dear listener. McKenna, by the way, was the Chancellor of the Exchequer back in 1915. So what benefits could you expect to see under a banking system that you owned as a shareholder along with your fellow Britons? Let us tempt you with some possibilities. The ending of usury, that is, the charging of percentage interest on loans. The restructuring of loans with fixed service fees enabling more effective planning by businesses and individuals. The issuance of debt-free money. The payment of dividends to all shareholders in the bank, that is, you. A reduction in the number of taxes. Currently, the UK has over 400 different types of taxes, many of which could be eliminated in due course. The teaching in school of how your bank works. A refocusing of our priorities so that the economic well-being of families comes first. All of this and more is possible when a bank is structured to serve the people and not, as is our current situation, when the people are compelled by coercive law to serve the bank. If this sounds like a pipe dream, and it likely will, you may want to look into the Bradbury pound, which was issued during World War I to stave off economic collapse. The Bradbury was issued as a debt-free, non-interest-bearing note and revived the wartime British economy in less than a year. What was done in wartime can also be done in peacetime. We hope this message has got you thinking. All of us have been living under an oppressive and duplicitous banking system our entire lives. Its power is considerable. fueled in great part by the combined greed of the many individuals and organisations that benefit from being at the head of the queue when money is created and placed in the trough. You are not in that queue, and under the current structure, you never will be. Whilst there remains private privilege in the field of banking, the economic health of the nation will remain permanently poor. The budgets issued by the government of the day will continue to address the symptoms, but never the underlying cause. Economic misdiagnosis will continue and guarantees that the lives of the great majority of us will be a permanent economic balancing act, which no budget can correct. A few years ago, the US economist Michael Hudson wrote a book called And Forgive Them Their Debts. The book examines the ancient world and the biblical instruction for a year of Jubilee, an act whereby debts were forgiven so as to revive the energy and well-being of the vast majority of the people and to halt the ever-increasing speed with which money was being transferred to creditors and thereby impoverishing the nation as a whole. The forgiveness of debts, of course, will not have been mentioned in the budget. We'll end with a quote from Sir Josiah Stamp, who was a non-executive director of the Bank of England from 1928 until his death in 1941. Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with a flick of the pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it all back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear, and they ought to disappear, for this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of the bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits. The answer to the banking problem is for you to become the bank. Please look out for more broadcasts from the political party that does not exist, but that you may wish did in the future. So there we go, Andy. That's me doing a little bit, another one of these things. I just keep playing around with them, but I thought the timing was right. I'd rather talk about that than Halloween, you see, although we can get around to talking about Halloween as well. But I understand from our pre-show talk, you might have actually paid attention to some of the nonsense that's been in the latest budget, and I know some of it is pretty harsh toward farmers.
Yes. It'll be interesting to hear the bowler hat farmer, his response to it, because he's been coming out with some excellent information on Eric von Essex's show. He does regular shows with him, so I'll be interested to hear his response. But essentially, what I'm going to do is I'll get to that. But before I do, because I need to look that up so I can give you the exact information, because in our pre-show chat, I said that there had been a great big hike in national insurance contributions. And for the benefit of those of you outside of the UK, national insurance is something that we pay like taxes on a salary, and it's supposed to pay for things like healthcare and your pension and stuff like that. Essentially, there was all this talk about all these taxes on people being raised by the Labour government. But what they've done is with national insurance, the employee pays some, but the employer pays some also. And when I just looked into it again, because I heard that this had been some huge rise on the employer, well, it said the employer national insurance contributions have increased by 1.2% to 15% from April next year. Well, 1.2% isn't like a lot, really. But then what they've also done is they've also slashed the earnings threshold. So the amount that workers must earn before employers pay national insurance was £9,100, but now it's going to be, or from April next year, it's going to be £5,000. So they've got that huge chunk on virtually every employee that they have that they're going to be paying national insurance on that they weren't paying it on before. And my feelings on that is that whilst a lot of people might be saying, well, it's better that the employers are paying it and it's not, we're not paying it as the employees. But of course, all these companies, if they say make a, 10 million last year, they're not going to say, oh, well, we'll just make 5 million next year. They're still going to want to make the 10 million, or they're going to probably want to make more. And so any extra that they have to pay out, they're going to find a way to pass it on to you. So you're going to end up paying it just through the price you pay for services and goods in day-to-day life. What's your thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, I never, Andy. Good grief, eh? I mean, I'm shocked. I'm gobsmacked by the whole thing. We've never heard anything as disastrous as that before, have we? Yes, of course we have. They're always riddled with all this sort of nonsense that they come up with. Actually, as you were saying it, I realised I was just thinking about that phrase, national insurance. What does it insure us against? It certainly doesn't insure us against stupid, bovine, mal-educated politicians mucking it up permanently. Does it? I mean, what are we insured against? The whole idea of pensions, like the pension funds and all these other things that they talk about, these great schemes of corralling lots of purchasing power for the future well-being of the nation, this is complete bilge. These things are plundered dry the moment they start to build. I mean, it's because all of this stuff takes place under this cloak that I mentioned. It's all under a cloak. It's all disguised. It's all very difficult to find out. It makes their management systems irrelevant. There's no point having this mass. Well, there is, from their point of view. The point of all that complexity is, A, that it's boring. Let's face it, banking is supremely boring and dull. All of this talk about taxation, all these other things, is also equally dull and tedious. It's nothing really to do with what's important to people, living their day-to-day lives. But it's very important to the parasite class, the private banking class, who need to maintain their position of control. And, so they basically take 6 from one and give 5 back here, and they shuffle it around. And apparently this is going to fix everything. But of course, what it won't fix is the fact that they're not actually using the opportunity that they've got. Governments don't even see it as an opportunity, but it ought to be, and they should see it like that. Lincoln, a dubious character, they're all, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, but Lincoln at least got it right when he was talking about money. When he said something along the lines of, issuing a nation's money is the greatest opportunity a government has. And in theory, that is true. If you've got accountability in your government, that's a big if, isn't it? I mean, it's a massive if. I was wondering what you thought about the thing with regards to, because I mentioned it here on the show before, Michael Hudson's book, Forgive Them Their Debts. It's a very interesting book, and I ought to try and get you a copy, or at least get you a PDF of it, Andy, because it stitches together the biblical law and the historical record. And although, I think in the early pages of the book he says most people would say that this is not possible in today's world to forgive debts, I'm sat there looking at that sentence going, why not? I suppose it's where there's a will, there's a way, but there is literally no will for it because there's a complete lack of awareness of it. It's not even that people are ignorant. It's that they don't even know that that topic exists, that you could even question this. And I think that goes for the political class as well. Their entire mode of operation, and the budget's the latest example of this, is to adjust the system as it stands. Whereas the actual true observation is that the system as it stands is bogus, it's harmful, it's for the benefit of a few at the expense of the many, it's never worked. And we know it's never worked because the pressure valve point is war. Every single time it gets its knickers in a twist, which it's bound to, they clear the decks by conducting war. And that brings us back to the Ukraine thing. And the Ukraine, stitching back into what you were saying as well a little while ago, is the home of the Khazars. That's the region that Khazaria was in, is the Ukraine. All of these things are interlocked, aren't they, really, when you look at it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's and very good message as well. I like your first one that you did. I played that actually as on one of my shows. So I hope that you keep them up. They're very well put together and very thought provoking. The It is interesting because, of course, there's been Tex Mars talked years ago about how they wanted to make the Ukraine area Israel 2.0, and this was one
Yeah,
of
he
those
did.
conspiracy theories that you heard back then and thought, well, that ain't going to happen, is it? Do you know what I mean? And then suddenly you see what's happening, and you look at it and you think, well, why are both of these, Russia and Ukraine, why are they conducting a war that's very much like a war of attrition that is sort of a bit reminiscent of the Battle of the Somme? We're hearing about all these hundreds of thousands of people who've died on each side.
Hmm.
Well, maybe that's the idea, that the purpose of the war is to kill a sufficient amount of people on both sides, and then we'll see who gets the land afterwards. So I suppose the chapter on that, or the story on that, has yet to be written, but it's certainly going in a direction that Tex Mars predicted, but I never really saw coming about because I saw no evidence for it back then. But
Hmm.
the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we fitted in, because you asked about the other big news from the budget was the farmers' situation.
Yeah.
And essentially what's gone on here is that in the past there was a um, well, basically there was kind of an understanding that the government would not tamper with exemptions for agricultural property, because what happens, a lot of these farms are handed down from father to son and there's no inheritance tax levied upon them. But think about World Economic Forum. Think about different uh, clips that you've played with like farmers saying that they've been paid certain amounts of money not to farm, and
Yeah.
they'll get more money not for using their land than for using it. So it certainly seems to be a clear message in this country. And also we're hearing stories about this throughout the world. And why wouldn't we be? Because the World Economic Forum are pushing it as well. Um, and we suddenly see this change come into the budget, that now they're going to be putting inheritance tax on the value of these farms over £1 million. Well, £1 million isn't a lot for a farm.
No, it isn't.
And according to the um, Country Land and Business Association, this is going to hit 70,000 farms, calling it nothing short of a betrayal, and saying it would jeopardize the future of rural businesses. And one thing that we hear on your show and on other shows, Malefica Scott used to talk about the solutions being building a local community, self-sufficiency amongst the local community, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
You talked about going out and getting your raw milk from your local farmer.
I do.
Well, it's interesting how it's going to jeopardize the future of rural businesses, because these people at the top, they don't want any local people owning their own things. They want all the corporations owning their things. I mean, I've said before that, and I maintain this, it's not going to be long before you see Amazon barbers. And literally, because we're seeing it already. In the past, you have the supermarkets, and then you would have local shops, like they would call them corner shops, things like that. Well, now you find that all these local shops, not all of them, but most of them, have been taken over by supermarkets. And for example, they're called Sainsbury's Local.
Hmm.
And you think to yourself, well, so now they want the local things as well. Well, this is essentially all these big companies are the corporate structure that this group at the top have in mind to control everything.
Yes.
And it's amazing as well. We talk about the internet, looking things up on things like Google. You never get the results you want. It's all very politicized. Even if you go shopping on Amazon now, they always wait until they get the monopoly, and then they start to take the proverbial, as it were.
Yeah.
And I've been onto Amazon and I've looked up a particular product. You forget what it was. It was something recently, but I had that, and I had a particular brand, and I wanted that same brand. So I don't know, say Panasonic phone, for example. So you type that in, and I've got line after line after line after line of sponsored links coming up, which aren't the brand I want. They're all phones, but they're not the brand I want.
Mhm.
Okay. And you're thinking, do they not make phones anymore? And you're scrolling down, suddenly you find one that you actually look for. But you've got so you're in their shop. That's like you going into a shop to look for a product and someone taking you and forcing you to look at all these others before you get to the product you want to see.
Yes.
It's just not acceptable. But they get away with it because this has always been the plan. We'll put all our competition out of business and then we'll start doing what we want. Like with YouTube, we'll build it up as a brand, and now you click on a YouTube video and the thing hangs around for a while before it does anything because it's trying to load up loads of ads and all this sort of stuff. Loads of stuff on it is banned that wasn't banned before because they waited until it became the go-to place, and then that's when we can do the censorship. That's been the plan from the start, and that's how we get people into it. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, that's in every area. It's in the area of films. It's in the area of culture. Everything is like mission creep. There's this reduction in variety. There's a reduction in the connection between the natural expression of people of each nation and having them hoovered into the unified corporate non-culture, which is what it is, all based, really, I guess, on the empire of the merchants. And the fact that they're obsessed with doing this, I mean, it's a little bit more than that. It's not just a commercial proposition. I know it is. They have to make their numbers add up. But it's the cultural deforestation of our lives. That's what's taking place in so many ways. I mean, we talk about on the show here, and I'll continue to talk about it, about developing local economies. But you're telling me things here that they're putting in place everything to make that not possible. And we know historically, and the Ukraine, again, comes into this because of the Holodomor, that the control of food is one of their prime weapons when they're really flexing their muscles, and that they don't care anymore, and they're quite prepared to literally see or supervise, overrule the deaths of millions of people, which is really what's taking place. And I think, if we're trying to use language accurately, I've mentioned this before, if you're in a conflict resolution situation, if you're in a dispute, and we are, but we are denied any means of communicating at all to the other side, if the other side, even if we were to get communication through, ignores them knowingly or dismisses them or depletes them or reduces their reach, which is the key thing, with the video platforms. Oh, yeah, your video's up. You got freedom of speech. What's that thing? You got freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. These people that we didn't appoint, though I'm not in a contract with, although they'll say, yeah, you are, you agreed to our terms of service and all this and the other, which is why the terms of service are changing all the time. It's this gradual sort of shepherding of people into a massively restricted life. And I'm coming back to that element of the protection racket. Oh, no, we need it like this to protect you all from all this evil information. There's a very funny one, Andy. I don't know if you've seen it going around from the BBC at the moment. Somebody sent it on the Paul English Telegram group that we have connected to the show. It's just hilarious. I mean, to people like you and me, it's a laugh a minute. It really is. It's very, very funny. They're talking about trust. The BBC. The BBC, the implication being, we are the voice of authority and we know what we're talking about. You can trust us. Well, we can trust you, but not to tell us the truth. We trust you to manipulate, to lie, to deceive, to obfuscate, to pare down the things that we really need to know, and to amplify pointless, vacuous guff, which is all that they do. They're an imbecilic organisation, and they're obviously staffed now by very, very stupid people who have been completely hoovered into this. I mean, it's not so much, evil is a concern. But there's something I think that's becoming self-evidently an even bigger concern, which is mass stupidity. People are becoming more and more stupid. Smartphones, stupid people. People are not willing to participate in the decision-making over their own life. They don't want to. Oh, I'll hand it over to an authority. Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But they don't even understand what you're saying now. It's got to the point you can't even discuss it. You're a troublemaker for suggesting that people ought to learn from their own mistakes. Whereas, the situation that's been built around us, we're never going to make any mistakes. You've got to drive slower because someone could die. Everything is terrifyingly dangerous. Don't go out the door. You might get hit by, a wasp. Oh no, these big wasps are around. It is mass psychosis. There's no two ways about it. That's exactly what it is. And I think all these things are aspects of it. They really are. I'm just thinking, actually, as I'm talking about the state of things and all this, that, and the other, I've got something just here. You may have heard this. I'm sure you probably have heard it. Let me, but this, I got a really good version of this clip the other day. This is from Till Death Us Do Part a few years ago, but it's pretty good. Listen to this.
Christmas ain't what it used to be. Nothing is. Unless it's me getting older. Things was cheaper, though. A lot cheaper. You could get 5 cigarettes for tuppence then.
They don't make them in 5s anymore, do they?
Well, you never see them.
People smoke more, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, people do seem to be smoking more since the cancer scare. Worry, I suppose. There was none of that then either.
What?
Cancer was all TB then.
They can cure that now, can't they?
Yeah. I suppose as soon as they can cure cancer, they'll think of something else to worry us with. My Uncle Wilf used to say he reckoned it was the government.
What?
Used to give us all these diseases.
That's a bit daft, Mum.
Well, they put them in our food. That's what he used to say.
Mum.
You can taste it in the water sometimes.
That's chloride.
Well, there you are.
They put that in to improve the water.
Well, it don't improve the taste. My Uncle Wilf used to say the only time they've got any use for us, the only time the government's got any use for us is in a war. Rest of the time, he used to say, we're an embarrassment to him. Yeah. He used to say that they only need so many of us to do the things that need doing, and the rest they'd rather be without. So they spray our food, put things in the water to keep us down. Well, they do it to rabbits. He used to grow all his own food.
Everything?
Well, all he could. He only had a window box.
I ain't got a window box, Andy. Have you got a window box?
No, not at all.
That nails it, though. That's 52 years old, that clip. 1972. That's from, for those of you outside of the UK who possibly don't recognise that, that was from a series called Till Death Us Do Part. Wasn't that the origin for the Archie Bunker character in the States as well?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Paul. I always draw that distinction because it's very important that he was called Alf Garnett in the UK, and who you just heard speaking was his wife and then her daughter, and the husband of her daughter in the series, so Alf Garnett's son-in-law, who would be the equivalent of the Rob Reiner character in the Archie Bunker All in the Family show.
Yeah.
He was played by a guy called Anthony Booth, who was the not only a descendant related to John Wilkes Booth, rather, his great-grandfather or something was John Wilkes Booth's brother, but also he was the mother of Sherry Blair, who, of course, was married to Tony Blair, who was the leader of the Labour Party.
All a coincidence, Andy.
So, yeah, they're interesting clips. And the other thing, you mentioned about the BBC. Now, on my Limish show every Sunday, what it really consists of is every day I look at the Daily Mail top to bottom. And like I get that example I gave you with that climate change in the headline. These are the sort of things I'm looking for, where they're trying to use events to steer a narrative. And I build these up over the week, and then I go through, basically create a show out of them. So but I read it, so you don't have to, type of thing. But I also have another section on the show where we look at the BBC Verify page. And yes, there is something called BBC Verify. And what's even more humorous than BBC Verify, where they claim to expose fake news, the URL is bbc.co.uk/news/reality_check. And on this page page, Paul, BBC Verify,
Yeah.
it says, what claims do you want BBC Verify to investigate? Well, the one that I mentioned on the line this show that I'd really like them to look into is to why their presenter said that Building 7 had collapsed on the World Trade Center disaster minutes before, while it was still shown as standing behind her. And can they also verify why, when someone wrote in to ask about that, they said they don't comment on conspiracy theories? Well, having a live feed and then saying that something collapsed before it did, that's not a conspiracy theory. That is someone saying something that hadn't happened yet before it happened. So that's something that really they should be investigating.
You're just a troublemaker, Andy. I can see the sort of person you are. You're the sorts of person we don't want in this world. People like you asking questions of the BBC and embarrassing them in public. It's I just think it's wonderful when they actually blow their own trumpet about how much integrity they've got.
Yeah, it's all cockiness. This is the whole thing. And it's, as you said earlier, they've got to that stage now. We've got the power. We've got enough. We'll do, you know, I had a very negative vibe last Sunday that wasn't planned. And sometimes shows just go in a certain direction. And I just went down the line of what they've done is the generation that preceded ours were a lot better off than the generation that preceded theirs. For example, I mentioned earlier my dad was a advertising manager, and he would, was flying off for business and stuff. Well, his father was a bus conductor, and his mother didn't work. My mother was a financial director. Her mother worked in a bakery, and her father made machine tools. And her father didn't have his own pair of shoes until he was 14 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. He was one of about 11 children. And when they would eat, only the people that worked in the family would sit down to eat. The others had to stand. That was the level of poverty back then. And so what these elites did, in my opinion, is that they made this boomer generation, if that's what you want to call them, so much more comfortable than their parents. But by doing that, they promoted all these lifestyles like free love and, forget all this God stuff and all this type of thing. And essentially, they kind of pulled them away from God, because even my grandfather, my mum said she used to see him praying. So even what he went through, he didn't think to himself, I didn't get my own pair of shoes till I was 14 years old. I'm not bothering this God stuff. He was religious.
Yeah.
And so my view is that they did that. So essentially, by giving you all these creature comforts, that was designed to take you away from God, and then they bolted all this other stuff on top. I would say things like the body modifications that they promote in a variety of ways, the tattoos and what have you. It seems to be that we're in the minority if we don't have them. And I believe that you can, if you do have something like that and you regret it and, you pray, because it's one of the laws in the Bible I touched upon earlier, is not to pierce or mark the flesh. But if you have done and you pray you don't do it again, I don't believe that you're going to be, that's going to put you in any jeopardy with God. If you've acknowledged that it's something you shouldn't really have done and you're sorry about it, can't really change it now.
Yeah.
But I feel that this is because it was done on such a wide scale. They had musicians promoting it, sports people promoting it, all these different people promoting it. I didn't see any tax on tattoos in the budget or any previous budget, come to think of it. So they're not looking for anything with that.
Tattoo tax. I quite like the idea of a tattoo tax. That's quite good, really. Sounds good too, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and so my feeling is that they feel that they've got us just where they want us. It makes it clear in the book of Deuteronomy that if you follow the laws, you get the blessings, and if you don't, you get the cursings. So their strategy has been to take us away from God. So not only will we not get the blessings, but if they can get us so far as to get the cursings, then when we really enough of us to turn to God, which I think we've gone past that point in time now anyway, unfortunately, but I hope I'm wrong, that it won't be enough and they'll get away with doing what they always planned, which was, as we can see, they've got a very deep hatred of people in the West.
They do. Andy, it's been fantastic. We're at the end of our time here. We're just going to roll on out. We've got a song to play us out with, which is, you'll all know this one. And if you don't, you can go and find it out afterwards. Another song by Steel Eye Span. It's a very famous one. We're going to play out with that in a minute. But I'll be back again here next week, live. Next week, we will be back live with the usual crew. And I'll be seeking Andy to rope you into more shows, even though I know you're in the land of Nod or wherever you are when we're doing it live. But we've got to do this more often. This has been a fantastic couple of hours. I've really enjoyed myself. Very different for me. Big change of pace, really, with all this kind of stuff. Any last few words that you might have to say?
Well, Paul, you were the first guest on my show on February the 1st of 2016. We've done over 200 shows together since then. You're one of my closest friends. And I've had a great time doing this show with you today. And just to let the audience know about the song, this is a live version of All Around My Hat, which is probably Steel Eye Span's most famous song. But it was from this same tour that I saw them on 2004. And it's a fantastic version that has this fiddle playing at the end that you just can't understand how this guy can really keep up with it. But it really is really good fun. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you all for listening today.
Ah, fantastic, Andy. That's brilliant. Yeah, if this cuts off for you live on WBN, head on over to Paul English Live. You'll be able to download the whole show and you'll be able to catch the whole end of the song because it's likely to just overrun the 2 hours. But Andy, as I said, fantastic. Really enjoyed myself these last couple of hours. Wonderful change of pace for me as well. So it's been brilliant. And we'll be back again next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now. We'll be live. You can get on the keyboards next Thursday. Look forward to it. Keep good.
It's all for my true love.